Thanks for joining us. Today we are going to speak about behavioral-driven mobile testing with Loadmill. My name is Yanir Taflev. I'm leading the solution engineering in Loadmill. I'm coming with engineering background. What suggests that maybe some of the things you will see today will be some technical. Other than that, I have experience of years in the test industry, and what we are going to cover today is basically a fun and easy way without coding to generate tests out of your mobile devices. And let me just check. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Ido? This looks good.
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So when it comes to mobile testing is hard. At least it's hard, harder than other tasks in test automation. And it's hard because a couple of reasons. First of all, mobile testing is slow. Slow because UI action are naturally slow. Rendering as an overhead, adding that to a long chain of components makes the execution cumbersome. It is unstable. It contains multiple moving parts, often involving different devices, increases the chances of instability and failures not for a reason. It is expensive. We actually need to emulate or utilize an entire device. Basically, when we test on mobile device, we utilize the entire layers from the operating system to all the background tasks that the operating system utilizes, and etc. up to the application that takes resources. And in most of the cases, or in many cases with today's technology, it becomes unpractical to automate them. For example, if we want to test maps or games, it becomes very hard to predict where exactly some elements will be, or what is the state of the automation. And so some of the games becomes very quick and fast pacing to what we have today. And on top of everything, we have steep learning curve. We must be expert in many fields. We must be experts in coding. We must know coding. We must know the framework we are using. We must know how we manage our devices, and basically to troubleshoot all the start and the setup. So those are the main challenges we have. By the way, I haven't mentioned, but if you have any questions, we will leave room for questions later on. So yeah, that's what we wrote. And we will keep with what we do, what we actually define, how we define behavior-driven testing. So basically, when we say that, we think of maybe Cucumber or Gherkin style. And if we expand this definition or go to the general definition, is basically testing or running tests or creating tests based on observations or examples or anything that describes a behavior. And this is basically the kind of short term of that is driving test cases that are based on behavior observation. And if we take it to mobile testing, it's basically use our mobile device and observe some behavior out of mobile device. And this is what we will do today with Loadmill. And how Loadmill makes it easy. So we will soon see a couple of demos, live examples, how it's going to work. But basically what Loadmill does is in a very codeless, simple, quick way, helps us to build API level behavior scenarios. And with that, it adds the ability to take static observation, static scenario, and convert it to parameterized dynamic flow. And also, since we are talking today about mobile, we won't go into other worlds of web or APIs between services, but this is also possible with the same concept, maybe a bit different setup with web and internal APIs as well. So keep that in mind. You can go back to Loadmill to utilize other tasks as well. Okay, so how it's going to work? Basically, here is a diagram, conceptual diagram of how it's going to work. So basically, what we will need to do is to listen to traffic. So every application that does something meaningful probably communicates with the server, and we want to capture this traffic. This traffic will represent our behavior. We will capture that with a proxy. We recommend a proxy called Proxyman. It's very easy, very intuitive, and has a lot of features. So that's an advantage, and it's free up to very extended usage. So it's nice also. And after that, we will take this behavioral traffic and feed it to Loadmill and let Loadmill to do its magic and generate tests and create executions, and we will be able to execute those tests later on. Okay, so after seeing the conceptual method of capturing, let's see what we need for the setup. So what we will use today is Android application. Similar concept, a bit different setup applies also to iOS. With Android, we will use emulator with Android API image. We highly recommend emulators because there are some tasks that are easier to do with the emulator. With emulator, we can put a certificate as system certificates, and it makes the life a bit easier in terms of we don't need to compile our application specifically for these needs. But other options are also available. It's after that we will have to deploy our application and proceed to the next step. So the next step is the proxy. We need to set up the proxy. After the installation, we will have to install the certificate. Certificate is the component that's responsible to first of all encrypt or decrypt the traffic and also ensure that all the communication is secure in terms of not fake requests, the authenticity of those requests. And we will also need to tell the device to use this proxy and pass all the communication through this proxy, through Proxyman. So we actually will be able to follow and see the communication there. Okay, I hope it makes sense. So basically, this is just a checklist of what we are going to do in just a moment. So what are we going to do is to start to make sure the emulator is running. We will start the proxy. We will drive our application. And by the way, here it's kind of important to emphasize that the Proxyman collects information all the time. So if you want to not confuse different scenarios, it is better for us to clear the history of Proximant very close to when we attempt to drive our application, just to make sure we are capturing the right scenario. And after that, after we are happy with our scenario, we can go to Proximant and export this traffic to har file that will be used later on in Loadmill. Okay, so this is the scary part that tends not to work in demos. Let's move to the demo. Okay, I hope you can see my other desktop now, because I don't see a green rectangle that I used to. Ido, can you confirm you see?
Yes, we see Proximant and the Android demo already.
Okay, thanks. So let's make a quick tour and maybe some guidelines what I did already for the setup to work. So let's look on Proximant for a moment. It's very intuitive. Here is the IP and the port Proximant is listening to. We have on the left side the different domains that we will see in a moment once we start our application. And on the right side, we will see more details, and we will be able to select one request and see its see the requests decoded, hopefully decoded request. It means if we see decoded request, it means that the setup went well and everything installed correctly. To show a couple of more things, so for the certificate part, we will go to, again, it's just a setup and it required only once. But one thing that I forgot to mention, there is an article that we are publishing that also covers those steps in more details. So you don't have to write or be worried you are missing steps. We will publish an article that actually covers exactly the technical steps, how to do that. I'll just cover the most important parts that they kind of make sense for what we're doing now. So in the Android setup guide, we can see that the certificate is installed correctly, and again, covering the proxy that we will set in a moment, and where we can get the certificate. And other than that, there are more steps that if we were not able to use Android emulator, there might be required, and we will have to insert them into our application, but that's not the case. We are using now Android emulator that is capable of capable to capture every application, basically. And for the other part is that the Proximant doesn't decode all the traffic automatically. It will leave it in an encrypted state unless we go to SSL proxy and specify either wildcard or a specific URLs that we want to see decoded. This is mostly Proximant, and here we have simple play pause button that allows us just to control whether we are capturing or not, and clear button obviously just clears the history. And for today's demo, we will use a demo application. I've chosen a budget rent a car. There we go. There is our application. You can see a lot of traffic going on. It's actually very interesting to see how much traffic that is not related to your application, to any application, actually goes behind the scenes. We have localytics, we have quantum metrics, crowd, and between those, we have maybe a couple of requests for budgets API. So, and actually in Proxyman, you can already see that the body is decrypted, like it was transparent to us, but obviously, since we installed certificate, this is the case. Otherwise, it won't be decoded. In the Android device, I want to show you a couple of settings that are relevant to what we need. First of all, if we go to the Wi-Fi settings, we can see that I set the proxy here. One tip that actually I can recommend that in emulators 10022, the address 10022 is kind of magic address to go to the host machine. So opposed to this IP will work as well. But if we change network or change location, this IP can change. But this reserved IP 10022 will remain forever. So I highly recommend using this IP as the proxy for this setup, of course. And the other thing is that to prove or to show you that we indeed installed the proxy that's responsible for the decoding of this traffic. So if we go to trusted certificates, we'll go to Proxyman. It's in P. There we go. So if we find Proxyman here, it's a good sign. It means that our setup went well and everything is working now. So now again, let's clear the history and attempt to reproduce or to create our observation. So if we open budget application, I know it shows a lot of API calls that some of them or most of them are not relevant. Actually, I can focus on budget.com and naturally it will filter out everything else. What we will do today, we will just create a reservation for a car and see how it goes. So if we go, this is my mock location. I'm in Newark, turns out. And we'll select the pickup location, pickup time, and the return time. We'll skip everything else. Let's say choose a bit fancy car. Why not? Okay. While I'm doing that, you can see that once in a while you see new call, there are posts, there are gets. You can see also the endpoint that sometimes already can make sense to some of us. And by the way, I'm not familiar with budget. I have nothing to do with their API. I never worked with budget, so there is nothing that hidden from your eyes as well. Okay, and one more thing, as a good citizen of the application, I always will delete the resources I allocated to not overwhelm or not to fill or overfill the databases and the storage that might happen. Okay, so the reservation has been canceled. You can see nothing much here. I think I'm happy with that. The last thing I will do at the moment is to export everything that we captured so far as tar file. So let's do that here. Okay, I'll put it on my desktop and we will switch back to my slides to keep going to cover a bit more information. Okay. Speak about Loadmill a bit. Okay. Okay, that should be okay now. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
I think maybe your headphones disconnected.
Yeah, there was kind of a wave of interruption probably around it. Okay, we're going to speak about Loadmill. So first of all, those of you who doesn't have Loadmill account yet, after this session, go ahead. You can sign up for free and actually reproduce the same exact environment, same exact tests on your environment. So you can do that. So we will open Loadmill. We will create a test suite dedicated for our demo, just to make sure we are dedicating a clear space for that. Suits our level of organization in Loadmill. And we will import the hard file and let Loadmill to do the rest and watch how Loadmill create the flow. We will see that in a moment. And after that, obviously, we'll be able to run the flow, to adjust it and make fancy stuff on top of that. So that was the slide, and quickly back to demo. Okay. So let me bring my Loadmill account. So first of all, I would like to introduce you to Loadmill application. It's a web application. You can see it here. We have a couple of areas.
Yanir,
yeah,
we still see the deck.
Okay.
Now we can see.
Thank you. Okay, great. So this is a Loadmill application, just one of the screens that happened that I'm landed in. Basically, we have a couple of areas. We have the building areas that we can build the different entities like suit, plans, chart flow that we will speak later a bit, and the other stuff like load testing that Loadmill also capable of. And there is also a results area and other administrative more areas like settings and so forth. Let's jump to the test suite. So I already prepared a test suite for our demo. Obviously, I tried that before the session. I wanted to pick first this time, but again, it's very easy to create a suite. And from this point, you will land on pretty empty area. Just a couple of words about what you will see in a moment. Or actually, let's do the import. Let's import the flow and talk after that. Let's import the har file that I just generated. There was the 26. Yeah, that's the har file I just created. And we can see Loadmill takes its time. It takes a second or two. And you can see, voila, something happened. First of all, this is our flow. We can see all the cubicles represent requests that will be played after in a moment once we click on run. And just to give it a significant name to this test, let's call it add remove reservation. Reservation. Okay, so with that we can dive deeper. So first entity that we see, every cubicle here is a request, and the multiple cubicles are aggregated inside flow. And what we see here, the entire screen represents a suite that actually capable of having multiple tests. And basically the eventual goal is to execute the entire suite with all the tests. And today we are going to focus in one flow that we just imported here. You can see already that we see some kind of parameters. Those are actually parameters that Loadmill extracted automatically. We can see here also used parameters area and extracted parameters area. All that done automatically by Loadmill. And by the way, just if I click on one of the parameters, I can see highlights where this parameter is used. And it's very nice that if I, for example, focus on one of the parameters, last name, for example, I can understand where it will be used and what is the implication of using this parameter, like where exactly. And other than that, you can see that Loadmill's AI is capable of generating descriptive names for all the requests that we capture. So if we were speaking about behavioral, it fits perfectly. We see descriptions for the behavior we are trying to test. And with that, by the way, we can see all the things that we used to see in a regular request. We see the body, if there is a body. Some of the bodies might have parameters. We see headers here. You can see the headers that might be parameterized as well. Let's run it and see what happens. Crossing my fingers, everything will pass. It takes time, so when it takes time, it means that it will keep to the end, and it just run. You see everything green, it means it passed. Otherwise, you will see reds here. If I just open one of the results, we can see the actual rendered requests and responses without the parameters, just the actual values. And think of once we create an ID, it always changes. It always becomes something different. So if we go to the extraction area, we can see where actually Loadmill takes the parameters. We can add more extractions. We can change the way we extract different fields. And after that, we will be able to use those parameters that we just extracted. Other than that, Loadmill also created assertions for me. So I don't have to write at least the basic assertions. If I want, I can add more assertions, but the initial things are already here. And we can specify, there are a lot of configurations that won't be covered, that we can specify which and the additional assertions that we would like to bring on board automatically. So that's also something that can be added. Other than that, I want to show you. So first of all, we created the reservation and then deleted it. Once we run it again, nothing seems like nothing happens in the application. So if I just disable the second post request that's responsible for the reservation, that actually put zeros everywhere and disable my reservation and run it again, I can prove you that it does something. Let's see. So you see, we went through everything, but this request that I just disabled for a moment. And let's jump back to my reservation, my rentals, and force it to refresh. You see, this is the reservation that just created. And I'll cancel it manually just for the sake of completeness. And let's go back to Loadmill. So what happens if you want to, for example, validate additional fields? We can actually use this tool called JSON Path and explore some of the responses that we have. This one is a request, but let's jump to the response. And for example, I want to make sure that the user's state is authenticated. So what we can do, we can just focus on user state. We can copy the path that we automatically get from here. And with very easy few steps, we can add new validation. So first of all, it will be auth state, for example, and sorry, not the headers, the extractions. Auth state, JSON path, and user state, and then we can, for example, make sure that user auth state not only exists, but maybe equals to unauthenticated. Okay, let's run it once again and see what happens. Oh, it actually failed, and it shows that actually I thought it will be unauthenticated. Okay, it was in purpose actually. I put unauthenticated to show you that how failures look like in Loadmill, but let's put authenticated once again. And now we can also enable the request we already disabled. By the way, this description is not accurate. We want actually to name it remove reservation. There we go. And one more thing, I want to mark this to run in CI and run it as entire suite. I'm going to show you how it is executed as a whole suite now. This is a different view that I didn't show yet, but what you can see, we see the test is in progress. We see the elapsed time, and if we had more tests, we could see them as well here. And same applies here. We can go and drill down to the very request and see what exactly going on every request, what is the response. And they see also the validations. For example, my custom assertion that I added, I'm still getting it is authenticated state, which is good. And I think for the moment, let's go back to the slides and keep going. Okay, so obviously we're all asked what's next.
Yeah, we still see the app screen.
Thank you.
Okay, now we can see the slides.
Thank you. So what's next? So our work or our things that we can do with the Loadmill and our tests are not done yet. Actually, we can enhance and introduce more functionality like login flows. Think of at the moment we didn't even notice that everything that we did was already after we logged in. So it will be good to solve once the login flow. So every scenario that we will be using later on, we'll be using that flawlessly. So we will be able to do that. I'll show it to you in a moment. We can introduce reusable components. If we see that some of the requests are reusable, we can just call them and create a group of components that will be easier to reuse. And after that, obviously, our goal is to run our test whenever we release new version, whenever we want to validate our PRs. And that can be achieved with CI integrations. We can schedule our tests if you want to make sure, for example, pre-prod environment works correctly. And we can integrate with source control for history tracking for branches and advanced capabilities. We can use things like Jira to create bugs out of Loadmill, because obviously tests meant to create bugs or spot bugs. So then we need to file them somewhere. And once we file them, we want to the results to be attached. So everyone who attempts to read and they solve the issue, we'll be able to see them back in Loadmill. And we can also integrate notifications to Slack, to email. We can use reporting to external tools like X-Ray or back to our CI/CD. And we also didn't cover today, but we will cover, we can use emails. We can verify email, for example, if a sign-up flow creates, sends an email, we can validate it with Loadmill. And if you want to check database that some records arrived, were filed in a correct way, we can do that with the database. And just to show you maybe a bit more about from Loadmill in the Loadmill screen. I hope you can see that. So speaking of login, we have entire section in every suite that is dedicated to login. We can dedicate particular flow. We can use a shared flow out of a list that we already prepared. We can choose, for example, Loadmill login and use it here, or just use custom requests that we copied maybe from other section of our tests. We can specify headers, different headers that will be attached to every request we will be sending. And those headers can be already parameterized. And we can use some basic things like basic authentication if we know such things exist in our system, and some other parameters. And also parameters area. So some of the parameters are already extracted automatically, and some of them can be added by ourselves. And those parameters serve two goals. First of all, we can modify them through this interface, or we can also modify them dynamically through the CI or through the command line once we execute that in different systems. So those tests are dynamic out of the box with all the parameters that you need to automate it later on and adapt it to different environments that you might have. Okay, so I think with that, we will conclude. Let me just share the last slide.
Yanir, you wanna? There are a couple of questions. Maybe you wanna?
Yeah, I know. Just
okay.
Just to recap, so thank you very much for this part, and you can note to yourself this shortcut URL. This is the URL for the article that covers the details, how you set up the environment step by step. Just follow the step and you will find yourself doing the same thing as I did today.